Hello, welcome. In today's video, I want to show you 9 interesting ways I am able to stay strategic during the onboarding phase so I can deliver first value as quick as possible and ensure the customer is satisfied so that I can foster long-term relationship. Now, without wasting too much time, let's get right into it. Now, you see, the first one is something I see many CSMs skip, right? And that is understanding the product deeply. You see, understanding the product, most especially the why behind the product, allows you to become an expert at mapping use cases to customer goals to help them achieve their desired outcomes. Now, I think the reason most CSMs skip this part is because, sometimes maybe the product is too technical or maybe don't use it as much, right? Which is understandable actually. But those shouldn't be limitations, right? Which is why I have a framework, like a personal framework I use every time to break down even the most technical products into the simplest language I can use to communicate with the customer, right? I will actually create a video on that later so you can keep an eye out for that. Now, that is that about understanding the product. That's the first way I'm able to stay strategic during the onboarding phase as a customer success manager. Now, the next way I am able to stay strategic, which is the second way, is walking through the onboarding process myself. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, they say if you want to understand something, you have to walk a mile in their shoe, right? Now, if you don't know what your customers are actually going through, how do you ever hope to understand them deeply and help them achieve the best outcomes, right? This is why going through the onboarding process yourself is important, because you're not just doing it for the sake of going through it. You actually want to identify friction points, things that can have negative impact on the customer experience, right? And you want to eliminate these things. Now, this is another reason why I said understanding the product deeply is actually important, because it will allow me to know the things that are actually important during the onboarding phase and the things that can be pushed post onboarding, right? That seamless experience is actually really important during the onboarding phase. And that's what the second way of being strategic helps me to do. Now, let's move on to the third way. And that is ensuring that I have clarified and aligned on the most important and urgent goal of the customer. Now, this is where something called customer success plans come into play. I have actually made a previous video on it, right, where I went into details of a secret framework I use to create effective customer success plans every time. I'll probably link it somewhere above this video, or you can go through my playlist to check it out. Now, when it comes to clarifying and aligning on the most important and the urgent goals of the customer, you want to ensure that you do it during the onboarding phase, because the onboarding phase is the beginning of the relationship with the customer. And you want to make a first impression that is as good as possible, because this is how you'll be able to foster and nurture that long-term relationship that turns into series of renewals and expansion and revenue growth and advocacy, right? So you want to ensure you clarify and align on their goals. And this is the way I stay strategic. I make sure I do this with my customer success plans. And that is my third way of being strategic. Now, moving to the fourth way I stay strategic, and that is understanding the emotional goal of the customer. This is probably something you're hearing for the first time, but here is what I mean. Have you ever heard about the haha moment, right? It's basically the moment the customer first realizes the core proposition of your product. Now, you see, what makes a haha moment memorable isn't just about what your product does better, right? It is also about how they feel about the fact that something like your product exists. Do you get what I'm saying here? Like, do they feel relieved? Do they feel confident? Do they feel energetic? Right? Whatever it is, there needs to be a certain positive emotion that accompanies your product, right? And my job as a CSN is to ensure that they realize this positive emotion during the haha moment. Now, you might be wondering, how do I go about, knowing the emotional goals of my customer? Well, there are several ways actually. I could ask for my marketing team from the product team, right? They usually have these personas, customer personas. I could get it from customer service, right? I could even get it from recorded calls of with other customers. Heck, I could even ask the customers themselves, right? That okay, what do you feel? How does this product make you feel? Maybe surveys and all. These are different ways I'm able to know the emotional goal of my customer. But the most important thing is just to ensure that I know it and I help them to realize it during the haha moment, right? Now, let's move on to the fifth way I stay strategic, and that is monitoring features that are tied to the customer goals. What do I mean by this? Now, if you remember in my third way of staying strategic, I told you that I want to clarify and align on the customer goals, right? I use success plans to do this. Well, one of the aspects of that is mapping the essential features that are tied to their current goals and ensure that I am constantly monitoring it. This is important because even though the products might come with a lot of features, right? Not everything has to be used at once. At least not yet. And at least not during the onboarding phase. You first of all want to ensure that, right, your onboarding gives customers solid reasons to be coming back, right, to stick around. And the way you can do it is by helping them to see value as quick as possible, which is why during the onboarding phase, I ensure they're only adopting the features that are necessary to their desired outcomes and helping them achieve it as fast as possible. Now, you see why that is important, right? And how it helps me to stay strategic for the long-term vision. So that is that about the fifth way. Now, when it comes to the sixth way of that I stay strategic, that is showing early wins constantly. Now, you see, as I am pushing the customer through towards their desired outcomes, right? I ensure to highlight milestones along the way to let them constantly see that value is being achieved. Now, this is especially important when you are dealing with customers, whereby some particular stakeholders, maybe like especially decision makers, want to see how fast, right, the return on investment to justify their investments, right? Or in scenarios where there are certain end users in the company that are hesitant to adopt the product, right? This is why this step, it really helps me to stay strategic because when I am showing value, right, every time though towards the overall goal, they're able to see that okay, I'm getting value, at least I'm seeing something, I'm achieving what was promised, right? You see how it helps me to stay strategic to ensure that they are happy, they get to that haha moment and they realize the emotional connection that I say is important. So that is that, right? That is how I help uh, stakeholders to see value. So now let's move to the seventh way that I stay strategic during the onboarding phase, and that is sending brief reports to executives, the higher ups, right? Now, you see, most times decision makers, right, they won't be involved in the day-to-day of, the product like other parties, but they are the one that sign the check. Which is why anytime, I have meetings, maybe anytime I have meetings with other stakeholders, maybe about like goal alignment, maybe we are sharing wins, or whatever, something that executives could care about, I usually send brief reports of it to them, right? Things that I know is relevant to them. Now, it could be like maybe increased revenue, improved efficiency, something, I have to send it to them. Now, I am not necessarily expecting reply, right? I am just doing this to make our presence known constantly. So that when we need them during maybe renewals or expansion, I won't be like a stranger that, hey, have you seen me before? We don't want that situation. So this is a way to make, it's part of multi-threading, right? Which is very key as a customer success manager. And so I hope you got that. Now let's move to the eighth way that I stay strategic. And that is having a checklist of things the customer must do during the onboarding phase based on what other successful customers have done. Now, that's probably a mouthful. Now, let me explain that to you. This really comes in handy, when you already have a good number of customers that have successfully passed through the onboarding phase and they have now become long-term partners. You want to have a track record of what they did, right? And create a checklist of the most important things they did during their time. That was similar, common patterns. Now you want to be using this as a checklist, for other customers, subsequent customers. This is another way, you can create a repeatable and measurable playbook, right? That you can only depend on. This is how I do it actually, right? And I'm able to also eliminate certain things on my plate that allows me to focus more on the most important aspects of my job. I even have another video where I went into details on how I use customer journey maps to create playbooks for each stage of the customer journey, right? All the way from onboarding to advocacy, right? You can check my past videos, right, to watch it if you're interested. So that's really important in staying strategic, and is one of the things I do, right? So now let's move to the last way that I stay strategic, which is the ninth way. The ninth way I stay strategic is reaching out first during any issues, right? I mean, if you're not being proactive, how are you being strategic? You have to, they go hand in hand, right? That is why it is one of the core parts of my strategic moves, right? I ensure that I reach out when an issue pops up and I try to undo it as quick as possible to ensure that the customer continues to get that positive experience, right? So these are the 9 ways that I am able to stay strategic during the onboarding phase. Now, this does not mean these are the only ways I stay strategic. There are definitely a lot more. These are just part of it, right? I will definitely make more videos on ways that I stay strategic. Not even during only the onboarding phase, but at every stages like renewals, retentions, advocacy, right? I have ways I stay strategic, and I'm going to make subsequent videos on them. And if you're interested in knowing how I do them, right, you can subscribe, and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss them. And as usual, if you learned one or two things from this video, right, please like and drop whatever you think in the comments, right? Anything that you have to say. So till next time, adios.